Welcome to the She's a 10 times 5 show with hosts Lori Jabbar and Michelle Emick. We're bringing public figures, subject matter experts, and other accomplished guests to the Studio 50 table to serve you up the best tips, tricks, and key takeaways that all us midlifers want to know about. Okay, time to join us for some times 5 fun. Let's go. This week's guest is Rachel C. Thomas. Rachel is a graduate of UCLA with a master's in education and a personal survivor of human trafficking. One of Rachel's most meaningful accomplishments is ending the game intervention curriculum, which is being used by over 100 facilities nationwide to help human trafficking survivors break the bonds of attachment to traffickers and or the lifestyle of commercial sexual exploitation. In this episode, Rachel will give a powerful testimony and 5 important takeaways and things we need to know as parents, as family members, and as a community as it relates to human trafficking. Let's go. Hey everyone, welcome to She's a 10 times 5. I'm Lori and I have co-host Michelle here. Hey Michelle.
Hey Lori, glad to be here.
All right. Okay. We have a very heavy topic to discuss, but a very, very important one. We are bringing back into Studio 50 Rachel C. Thomas, who not only is a human trafficking survivor, but she is a huge advocate in educating everybody about this really important topic and problem.
Yeah, I think the fact that we're, providing this platform, there can't be enough of these type of platforms for her to tell us what we need to know, because this is a huge problem. And I think if the more we can educate people out there, the better. And so I'm really honored that she's come back on and going to give us more information to help bring awareness.
Yeah. Awareness is key. And I think the other thing, Michelle, is as I've kind of learned more and more and had multiple interactions with Rachel, it's also a very, very misunderstood topic, because I think a lot of times we think that it happens to a stereotypical type of individual and victims are, in a certain type of lane, but that is so far from the truth. It really can happen to any one of us.
Yeah, and that's really right. And that's really her story, which is so interesting. And I had listened to that when she was on the podcast the first time and was blown away by her story. And I'm sure she'll go into a little bit of that, again. But yeah, I think listen in. Everyone really needs to listen in, watch this episode. We can't learn enough about it because it can affect anyone.
Anyone. Yeah. All right, let's go.
Let's go.
Okay, welcome back, Rachel C. Thomas. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you also. I'm so honored to be back and excited for today.
Yeah. So for the new listeners, if you haven't caught it before, she's a recurring guest, and this is an extremely powerful topic that pretty much affects us nationwide and internationally, and it's not going away. And so the whole concept of human trafficking and the misnomers and whatnot, we're bringing her back to the table to talk about all of it. And she's going to give us the 5 things she wants our tenors to know. All right. So let's start with number 1.
Number 1 is that human trafficking is happening everywhere. Globally, and in our own country, it is sadly in every community. Anywhere there's a market for sex, which is everywhere. So from the rural to the urban, from inner city to the highest, upper middle class and beyond, it is happening everywhere.
Yeah. And would you say that it's geographically happening more on the coast or along the borders? Or because I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that human trafficking is people coming into the country more than being preyed upon within our own country. Would you agree with that?
I think, yes, people do probably think it's people being smuggled over here. And, if we're talking about human trafficking, that is a large umbrella. And so there's labor trafficking, there's sex trafficking, there's also organ trafficking, which will probably start to become more talked about in the media. But, there's a whole lot of US born citizens who are being trafficked in America. So
it's interesting. I went on a trip a few years ago and we were staying close to the airport, and I just had a bad feeling of some stuff that was going on in like one of the rooms. So I went and reported it next morning. I was like, a lot of open and closed doors and so forth. And she said, thank you for letting us know. We'll contact the authorities. She said, trafficking is huge around here, especially being close to the airport. And she said, did you notice the signs? And I said, no. And now I'm so aware of it because it seems like wherever I go, I'm seeing the signs about trafficking.
Yeah. Which is great. We do, there is the law to have the signs posted, especially in airports and in hotels and places like that, which is needed. And I think the more aware we are, and I love that you made the call. Hopefully you were wrong, but it's better to be wrong and to follow through and to make a report than to have a suspicion and to quiet your own, gut feeling. But the heartbreaking thing about human trafficking is that it also happens to kids in pedophile rings. And that can be, near Disneyland. I have a friend who was trafficked right in Anaheim for people that went to Disneyland for, because there's a pedophile ring there. And I mean, so it is literally, it can be with adults in hotels. It can be, it's very insidious. So
it's everywhere. How big, what do you have the numbers on that? I mean, what are we looking at? Like, how big are we talking?
As far as numbers of victims of human trafficking? Yeah. We don't have reliable numbers because so many victims have not been found. But what we do know is that the United States is the number one producer and consumer of child pornography. Like the technical term is CSAM, child sexual abuse material. So we are the number one producer and consumer. And so we know that there's a whole lot of pedophilia and child sex trafficking happening in America.
Wow, that's disheartening.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? Not surprising.
No.
For some reason, I don't know why that is, but I'm not surprised.
Well, we could go down there. We could go down that, but I mean, everything is so hypersexualized, and
addictions, and so much of it is fueled, by the internet, and so yeah.
Okay. Next point.
Point number 2 is that there is no type of victim and there's no type of trafficker. And so oftentimes in the media, we'll see that the pimp is always a Black man, or we'll see the victim as, a certain type that's standing in a mini skirt on the corner, getting in and out of cars. That is one small type of urban trafficking that is, street-based or prostitution-based, but there are so many different forms of human trafficking. And so we really have to broaden our lens of who we think could be a trafficker or a victim. And so it looks different in different communities, different geographical regions, different types of trafficking. So really just becoming educated on the different ways that trafficking does happen, and not stereotypically seeing this crime as just one type of victim or one type of trafficker.
Well, yeah, and you can attest to that because as a survivor, how you got into that was a very, typical situation in normal circumstances that would be trustworthy. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like, just give a really brief kind of overview on kind of how you got down that path?
Sure. I do shatter the stereotype that, the main human trafficking victims in our country are runaway youth from, troubled backgrounds, who are super vulnerable and in need of someone to, save them or rescue them. I'm from a wonderful home, and I was raised upper middle class in Pasadena, California. My mother is an attorney. My dad is a church deacon and a businessman. I never experienced any form of abuse, had really a wonderful all-American childhood. And I went to a top 20 university. I was at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. And freshman year, I had joined an a cappella group. I made the dean's list. I studied abroad during my sophomore year in Spain for 6 months and was really just having a wonderful college experience. And then in my junior year, just after I had turned 19 years old, I met a man who told me he was a modeling agent, and he was wearing a 3-piece suit, and he had business cards, and he had other college girls with him who were friendly and beautiful and very inviting and warm. And so it turns out that 6 weeks after meeting this modeling agent with this great opportunity to build this glamorous modeling career, 6 weeks after that is when I was forced into human trafficking. I didn't have language for it. I never had heard of human trafficking. I didn't have words for what it was, but that was what he ended up. He was a trafficker disguised as a well put together, professional, polite modeling agent. So that is, I'm one story of many. I have, friends who from all different walks of life. And there's different trafficker strategies, whether it's the professional, the CEO pimp. That's kind of a term that I coined for the type of professional business opportunity strategy. But there's, romantic relationships. Sometimes the interfamilial, if a parent is on drugs or something and they're selling their own kids from a very young age. So it happens across the board. And so, yeah, it just really reinforces that there's no type of victim or trafficker.
Gotcha. And you might be bringing this up in one of your other points, but, one of the things that we have talked about is a lot of times it's when the individual gets put in a compromised position and there's photographs that they use and hang over their head. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes. So according to the federal definition of human trafficking, the means of trafficking are force, fraud, or coercion. Unless you're talking about a minor, someone 17 or under, you don't have to prove force, fraud, or coercion. But for, just in general, for human trafficking, causing someone to engage we're talking about sex trafficking, causing someone to engage in commercial sexual activity by use of force, fraud, or coercion. And so when we're thinking of coercion, it's really that psychological manipulation. And usually it is coupled by violence, threats to harm, threats to kill, your family or kill you. But a lot of it also is a psychological. And so maybe filming you in a compromising situation, or having something that they could use as blackmail, or, making you think that it's your fault. Or, if you have experienced sexual abuse as a child, then I've heard, traffickers say, well, you started seducing the people, you seduced your uncle when you were 3 years old. This is in you. This is who you are. And a lot of the psychological manipulation that happens to really create guilt and shame and making people think that this is their identity and that they were, chosen for this lifestyle.
Yeah.
Wow. This just makes the hairs on my arms stand up. It just gives me chills when you're talking about your story and just all of this. It's just, but it is so important to share as much as we can. So people are educated on this. Wow.
Rachel, would you say that this whole realm of trafficking is exponentially exacerbated because of devices and social media?
I would say that. And in fact, that was point number 3. So
I teed you up right there. I knew it. ESP.
Yeah. I mean, the Department of Justice officially in 2021 released a report saying that within America, of all the victims who have been, found in America, over 50% of them had some form of online component. So whether they met their trafficker online on a, social media app, a dating app, and then were lured out of their home and, fell into the hands of a perpetrator that acted like someone else online, or if they, were trafficked online through websites, through, video camming, through forced, pornography or sexual material. So online has some presence in over 50% of all trafficking victims now. And that is huge, because it really means that predators can access our kids when they are safe in their bedroom, right in the next room, and they could be, talking with a predator. And it's so much more common than we think. And it hits really close to home. And a lot of the calls that I get are from parents who said, I never thought it could happen to my kid. And, there's when we're talking about the coercion or the manipulation, there's that it first starts with, presenting themselves as some solution to some problem that the kid has, even if the problem is as minor as, my parents won't extend my curfew to midnight. Oh my goodness, they don't realize that you are so mature for your age. They're trying to, stop your fun, or any type of wedge that they can draw between a child and their support system. That's step one. And I'm the solution, and I'm going to, treat you better, or I understand you better than your parents do. Every time we get a call from parents, if they were lucky enough to be able to see the messages or to have information about what that grooming looked like, that's always one of the first steps, is that drawing a wedge there. And then it's just systematic, and it's a real, methodological step-by-step process to just meeting someone online and luring them further and further away from safety. And then that's usually, how it happens in America with our kids that are caught up into sex trafficking.
And a lot of the I don't know if it's called catfishing or whatever, right? But like presenting themselves as someone else. So like if a young girl thought she was talking to someone who maybe had things in common with them and so forth, but that's really not even who they're talking to on the other end.
Well, throw this in. This is a new twist that's happening, is with artificial intelligence, AI apps. They can somehow grab, and this is why I don't understand why so many parents put so much shit out there, not shit, but content out there about their own kids. It's just crazy because they can actually get a recording of your child's voice or someone else that you're close to and replicate it so you think you're actually talking to that individual. It's nuts.
Yeah, I just heard that the other day. Someone else told me that they could do that.
Well, this just happened on Saturday. I got a call from a mom who was able, thank God, to intercede. Her 12-year-old told her 6-year-old about this new boyfriend she had. And the 6-year-old was like, something doesn't sound right. The 6-year-old told mom, hey, Sissy has a new boyfriend and he lives in Colorado. And the mom does some research, and I mean, it was coming from an IP address, not even from an actual, phone. The IP address was not in Colorado. It was 20 miles from their house. And this person that lived at the house was not a child, and they were using a voice changer to sound like a child. I mean, it goes really, it is, I mean, yeah, with online access and with AI and with voice changers, predators can create any persona, and they have a targeted victim in mind, and they will just prey on that victim, or just send out 100 messages, and whichever child responds, they're like, all right, I got one,
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think what you said is so accurate, is that it's methodological. How did you say it again? There's a methodology. Oh my God. You know what I mean.
Technology. Yeah.
Thank you.
I was
I'm
thinking
having a
too, like,
major blonde moment here. And they're patient, right? So they have a very patient process and way in which they crack the nut. And I think that's really important to know. This doesn't happen necessarily overnight, right? These guys and gals are good at what they do.
And it's not just the phones too. Like, I know my daughter loves video games, and we have to be very strict on who she's playing with and so forth, because every time you turn around, there's just random people joining the Roblox and the Minecraft and all these different Fortnite and these games.
Those chat rooms. Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's, I mean, that kind of also that leads into my fourth point, which is we all have a responsibility to be part of the solution. And if not, then we really are being part of the problem. And so, there's so many different ways to get involved. But even just as parents, I don't believe that we can ever do enough to put on all of the, security apps and the privacy settings and turning off the location settings and learning every single video game and app. There are 100 new apps every day. The biggest thing that we as parents have the responsibility to do is educate our children about, age appropriate, what is, body safety, what is, a predator, what is human trafficking, and to keep that dialogue open so that they know that even if, they get that pause in their spirit, or the person that they thought was a friend is now asking them to do something that doesn't feel right, they know they can go to mom, they can go to dad, they can go to auntie, they can go to someone and not be in trouble, and be able to have a safe place, even if they've already done some stuff that they knew they shouldn't have been doing. And so I think that we need to open those doors of communication. I always liken it to, having the sex talk with your kid is already, it produces anxiety, and it's like, when do I do it? How do I do it? It could be kind of awkward. But having the sex trafficking talk is that on steroids, because now we're not only talking about sex, we're talking about, the evils of the world and trauma and some really rough stuff to even think about, let alone talk about with our child. But we have that responsibility, because if they're online, they are connected to all the beauty and danger this world has to offer, and we have to be their safe place. We have to start the conversations. We have to check in with them and make sure that they know that we are who to turn to the first inkling that something could be awry. So,
yeah. Well, I think that's so important. And children, and I remember way back when before electricity, when I was a kid, you don't want to disappoint your parents. And there is that fear. And I think that if someone has a compromising photo, let's say, that having, the ability to kind of work through that with the ones you love is so important.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And, I think one also powerful thing that parents can do once your children are at an age where they are more mature and they can, really have this type of dialogue, but telling them about some of your mistakes, because all of us probably did some things that, whether it was our puppy love or first crush or whatever it was, or, really, really opening the conversation and putting things on the table and making it a safe, comfortable place for your kids to come to you. Because even in my own experience, that first night that I knew that I was in trouble, when he called me the B word, and like when I saw him flip from like this nice guy and it was over the phone. It was over the phone, and he was like, bitch. And when I saw the flip happen, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's not who I thought he was. I had a moment of pause, and I'm like, do I call the police? But, he just like called me a bitch. I had never dialed 911 before. I'm like, that might be dramatic. Like, I don't know. Should I call my parents and tell them that, like, I've been, working with this modeling agent, even though I knew they didn't want me to have a modeling career? I was in school to be a teacher, and, And so there was a moment there that if I felt comfortable enough that I would have called my parents before it got into human trafficking, because the very next day is when he forced me into trafficking and threatened to kill me and my parents. And so I think my parents are wonderful and amazing and did a whole bunch of things right. But I was raised in a Christian household where the sex talk was, don't do it. And that was it. And so there was not that open door there. And I knew they loved me, but since I was always the good kid, I wasn't sure if that love was conditional on me being, the straight A student and the prom queen and the athlete and all the things I was. And so I was more, I kept the secret of this trouble I might be in because I didn't have that type of, we just hadn't gone there. My parents and I had never had that type of a conversation. And so instead of having it, I just was like, well, I could handle this. And then it ended up
0 to 100. Yeah.
I think that's such a great takeaway because and so many parents, and we all, as parents, we get it. And I'm even thinking back to myself when I was, college. I mean, there's so many things we didn't tell our parents because we didn't want to get in trouble, or we didn't want them to think badly of us, or
worry about us, right?
Worry about us. So we just held it in. And so anybody could have gone through that same exact path. So I think that takeaway really is to come from a place of not judgment, but from learning. And obviously communication is always everything, but making sure that your kids know that they can come to you with no matter what. And that love is unconditional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really good because I think especially in the world we live in today, things can go and escalate from 0 to 100 in a blink of an eye. And I think you said a great point, which is I think a lot of times our children hear about all the success we've had or the different jobs and scenarios. We rarely talk about all the speed bumps we've hit along the way. Yeah. And I think them knowing that, hey, we've made mistakes too, and being accepting of mistakes. Just because you make a mistake doesn't mean you're a bad person or you're not successful. It just means you're human, right?
I always am like, how am I not in jail?
Right. Well, I was thinking that, Michelle.
No, but I mean, we all did stuff.
Yeah, we did.
So, I think that it is important for kids to know that, like, hey, we're not perfect, but great takeaway.
Yeah. Well, and just to kind of give you kudos, Rachel, I think to go along with this point that you're making is, it's very easy for someone who has gone through what you have gone through to try to put it in their rearview mirror and not talk about it. And I think you sharing your experiences and being a resource for others is so invaluable. Mm-hmm. It's very easy for us to go through trauma or have a mistake and be an ostrich. But, you doing what you're doing is we all should be talking about these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We should, and you actually just teed me up for point 5, which is, there's so much power in our stories and in our journey. And that doesn't mean everyone has to speak on a stage or write a book about it, but just being able to have grace and compassion and transparency with yourself and your trusted few to really talk about the journey, whether you're in the middle of a traumatic journey or on the other end of it. And I think that, from the Me Too movement, like there's so much power in being able to voice your journey. And I am so appreciative of the space that I get to fill today in the anti-trafficking movement, because really I get to represent that there is hope, that, yes, this is a dark, ugly, heart-wrenching, terrible crime and reality that so many people are facing, but that if it doesn't kill you, there is hope on the other side. And so I think hopelessness, a lot of survivors feel that way, or victims who have not yet reached survivorhood. And a lot of times people hear about human trafficking and they think it's just, oh my God, like the world is ending, or this is just so bad. I could never, do anything to be part of the solution here. But we all can. whether it's talking to our own kids. My mom was inspired to create an internship program for survivors who were, ready to start a new career or just like enter the workforce. There's so many different ways. I don't even have time to describe them all, but there's a lot of amazing organizations in many communities doing great things. And so if you can be part of someone's recovery story, or if you donate to organizations. I think, Lori, you and I met at why am I blanking? This is terrible.
Free to Thrive. Yeah.
Thrive.
Yeah.
Yes, free legal services to survivors of trafficking. I mean, there's so much hope. There's so much life and beauty on the other side of human trafficking that I want people to remember, that we are people who have been through some really horrible, dark things, but there's still hope.
Amen to that. Yeah. And I think, just to underscore, and Michelle, you and I have talked about this offline is, we sometimes stereotype certain scenarios and situations. And I think repeatedly we've said in this conversation, having an open mind and heart is so incredibly important. And I hope when people listen to this or watch it, that they do that as well and become part of the solution, just like you said. Yeah. And yeah, Michelle, how do you feel about this conversation? You have a 11-year-old girl. What?
Yeah. I mean, it's, I kind of went down, I learned more about it after that when I had mentioned earlier. And then during COVID, I think started researching more, and I went and took I got the training, the online training, so that I could learn the tips and, the things to identify and what to look for, because I was so freaked out by my experience and had no idea. And so I think it's so important. I think I probably go the other way with my daughter. Like, I'm so much like, okay, I'm a little bit of a helicopter parent, but I've heard so many of the stories that I feel like I want to just, be in protective mode all the time. But I do have the conversation with her. I'm like, you can tell me anything. Yes. But yeah, the fear is there. I mean, the fear is there because of the online, I think, scares me the most. And with the fact that you said 50%, it's just, we just need to keep our eyes open at all times.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. This was such, as predicted, this is such a great conversation. You're so poised and, on the ready with all of these types of questions and communications. I could spend 2 hours with you, Rachel. I mean,
no, important topic. And you guys are moms and community leaders. So yeah, I have enjoyed this conversation also. And it was hard to keep it to 5 things, but
I know. I'm interested in the organ trafficking. Can we?
Oh, we're not. No, wait. We can't handle that.
I need a little bit. Okay, offline. You gotta. Maybe I can't handle it, but.
Okay, everyone, thank you so much for listening and tuning in. And it's Rachel C. Thomas. She's got a plethora of resources, and you got to lean in. It's really good stuff. All right, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you next week. Adios.